In the bustling, echo-filled terminal of a major international airport, the camera pans across travelers dragging suitcases, checking phones, and rushing to gates. Among the sea of hurried motion stands a young woman, serene and still amidst the chaos. She holds a boarding pass in one hand and a small handbag in the other. Her appearance is elegant but modest. Soft blonde waves fall over her shoulders, and her light pink blouse tucked into a flowing skirt gives her a graceful presence. She's clearly on her way somewhere important, yet her eyes, gentle and reflective, scan the crowd around her as if searching for something, or someone. The distant sound of boarding announcements fills the space, and flashes of sunlight from the massive terminal windows paint streaks of warmth on the floor. Behind her, people move quickly, businessmen with briefcases, families corralling children, elderly couples walking hand in hand. The energy is restless, but she remains composed, standing just outside the boarding gate. She watches as a father nearby struggles to soothe his crying daughter. He looks exhausted, unshaven, and weighed down by a heavy coat and even heavier emotions. The little girl clings to him, her small face buried into his chest. Her pink hoodie and soft curls contrast sharply with the stress on her father's face. They're alone, clearly overwhelmed, perhaps even stranded. The woman's expression shifts subtly from curiosity to concern. She takes a few quiet steps toward them, slowly approaching without hesitation. She looks down at her ticket, then back at the man and child. The pause is meaningful. Her eyes soften as she realizes what she's about to do. With quiet resolve, she extends her hand, offering her own ticket. The man looks up, startled and confused. She gives a reassuring smile. No words are needed. In that moment, a simple gesture begins a story that neither of them could have anticipated, one built on kindness, humility, and a twist of fate. The man stood near the gate, cradling his daughter in one arm while juggling a carry-on bag and a tattered backpack with the other. His face was marked by exhaustion, not just from travel, but from something deeper and more enduring. His unshaven jaw, wrinkled coat, and tired eyes told a story of sleepless nights and quiet struggles. His daughter, no older than 3, clung to him with one hand wrapped tightly around his collar. Her wide, innocent eyes darted around the unfamiliar airport, her little lips trembling as she fought back tears. She had clearly been crying before and was still on the verge of another outburst. Her pink leggings and soft hoodie looked slightly wrinkled, her hair tousled and in need of a comb, but her grip on her father's shoulder showed just how much she relied on him in this overwhelming place. The man crouched slightly, trying to comfort her with a tired smile and a quiet whisper. "Just a little longer, sweetheart," he murmured. He fumbled with his phone in one hand, likely checking the boarding pass or gate number, but the screen slipped from his grasp for a moment before he caught it. He sighed heavily, frustrated with himself. Around him, people moved like clockwork, efficient, fast, and indifferent, a blur of motion that only added to his stress. He glanced toward the ticket counter, then back to the child, calculating in his head whether he could make it there and back without losing his place in line or causing his daughter more distress. She tugged at his coat and softly whimpered, "Daddy, I'm tired." Her voice was small and honest, the kind that slices straight through any parent's heart. He bent his head and kissed her forehead gently, whispering words of comfort, though his own eyes were growing glossy. Despite all efforts to keep calm, his body betrayed the tension, his shoulders were tight, his grip too firm on the bag, and every now and then, he glanced up as if hoping someone would appear to help. But no one did. The airport felt colder in contrast to their quiet battle. People hurried past, not unkind, just unaware. To everyone else, he was just another traveler. To his daughter, he was the entire world, a tired, worn-out world doing everything possible to hold itself together. As he took one more step toward the gate, uncertain if he'd make it on time or be turned away, a moment was about to arrive that would change everything, and he didn't even know it yet. She stood a few steps away, silently observing the man's quiet struggle. Her fingers gently gripped the edges of her boarding pass as she watched the little girl rest her head on his shoulder, her tiny hand curled into the collar of his coat. The woman's heart stirred with emotion. It wasn't pity, it was something softer, more human. A deep understanding that came from empathy, not judgment. She had no idea who the man was or what his story might be, but something in the way he cradled the child, in the way he moved, tired but careful, told her all she needed to know. He was doing his best, and his best was barely holding things together. People around them continued to move without noticing. A business traveler rushed past, headphones in, suitcase rolling noisily behind him. An older couple stood nearby, discussing their boarding group. The gate attendants were scanning tickets in a rhythm, calling for passengers by row numbers. The boarding line was growing shorter, but the man hadn't moved. He was clearly unsure of what to do. Was his flight about to leave? Did he miss a check-in? Was his seat even confirmed? She could see the hesitation in his eyes, the way he looked between the gate, his daughter, and his phone like he was weighing impossible choices. The woman glanced at her own ticket. Row 7A. A good seat. A direct flight. She had plans, or at least she thought she did. But in that moment, none of them felt more important than what was unfolding in front of her. Her grip on the ticket loosened. She inhaled deeply, not because she was nervous, but because she knew she was about to do something that mattered. Something simple, but powerful. Without a word, she stepped forward. The man noticed her approach and turned slightly, cautious but polite. His expression was guarded, as if he expected a stranger to complain about blocking the way. But instead, she held out the boarding pass in her hand, offering it with the kind of calmness only sincerity brings. Her voice was soft, but steady. "Take it," she said. "You need it more than I do." The man blinked, confused. I don't understand. "It's my seat," she continued. "It's a direct flight. You and your daughter need to be on that plane." He looked down at the ticket, then at her, then back at his daughter. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Emotions swelled behind his eyes, gratitude, disbelief, and a kind of silent relief that hit deeper than he expected. His daughter looked up, blinking at the woman with wide, curious eyes. "You don't have to," he began, but she shook her head gently. "I want to." There was no pity in her voice. No charity. Just compassion. And in that brief exchange, something unspoken passed between them, the kind of understanding that exists between two strangers who meet exactly when they're supposed to. For a long moment, he just stood there, frozen, holding the ticket in his hand as if it might vanish if he blinked. The little girl nestled against his shoulder, calm now, sensing the change in energy around her father. He looked at the woman again, searching her face for any sign of doubt or hesitation, but all he saw was a quiet certainty in her eyes, the kind that didn't need further explanation. He hadn't asked for help. In fact, he was the type who rarely did. But now, here it was, freely offered, without strings or expectations. "I don't even know your name," he said softly, his voice rough with fatigue and emotion. She smiled faintly, a hint of warmth brushing her features. "You don't need to." He looked down at the ticket again, the weight of it sinking in. It wasn't just a pass to a flight, it was a lifeline. A way out of the stressful limbo he was trapped in. He had spent the past few days juggling calls, paperwork, missed sleep, and a sick child, all while dealing with cancelled flights and unhelpful clerks. He was at his breaking point. And then this woman, a stranger, stepped in without question. It felt surreal. "Are you sure?" he asked, still hesitant. "This flight, it's hard to get on. You'll be stuck waiting hours." She nodded slowly. "I'm not in a rush. But you look like you need to be somewhere." His throat tightened. The truth was, he did. Not just physically, but emotionally. He needed rest, clarity, and maybe even a reminder that kindness still existed in the world. And here it was, embodied in the form of a soft-spoken woman offering him her seat like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice cracking under the weight of all the things he couldn't put into words. She gave a small nod, as if to say, "You're welcome. Now go." With one arm, he adjusted his daughter, holding her close. With the other, he held the ticket tightly, walking slowly toward the boarding gate. Each step felt lighter, not because his burdens had vanished, but because they were no longer crushing him. He glanced back once, half expecting the woman to disappear like a dream. But she was still there, watching quietly, hands folded in front of her, offering a gentle smile that said more than words ever could. The gate agent scanned the ticket without issue. "Have a good flight," she said routinely. He nodded, still caught in the gravity of what had just happened. As he stepped through the gate and toward the plane, his daughter resting quietly against his chest, he whispered softly to her, "There are still good people in this world, sweetheart. Don't ever forget that." Behind them, the woman turned and walked back into the terminal crowd, unnoticed by most, but unforgettable to the one person who needed her kindness the most. She stood still for a few moments after he boarded, watching the final passengers trickle through the gate. The crowd began to thin, the urgency of travel slowly dissolving into a gentle hush. Her eyes remained on the corridor where he had just disappeared, holding onto the quiet fulfillment that followed her simple act of kindness. She had no idea where he was going, or why he looked so burdened, but something about that moment felt significant, like she had done something right without needing to explain why. She turned away from the gate and slowly walked toward the rows of airport chairs, her footsteps quiet against the polished floor. Settling into a corner seat near the tall windows, she placed her handbag beside her and folded her hands on her lap. Outside, she watched the plane being prepared, fuel trucks, luggage carts, and crew members moving briskly. The soft hum of the airport had returned, but now it felt different. Calmer. She wasn't frustrated about missing the flight. Strangely, she felt lighter, as if giving up her seat had also freed her from something she hadn't even realized she was carrying. Unbeknownst to her, a man stood a few yards away, watching her quietly. He wore a tailored suit and carried a sleek briefcase. His presence blended in with the business travelers moving through the terminal, but his gaze was focused, purposeful. He had witnessed the entire exchange from a distance, the moment she noticed the struggling father, the hesitation before stepping forward, the calm sincerity with which she handed over her ticket. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop or stare, but the gesture had caught his attention. In a place where people often rushed past each other without a glance, what she did stood out like a light in the fog. He watched her now, the way she sat with quiet grace, her expression neither proud nor regretful. Just peaceful. There was something about her that felt rare, not because she had given away a plane ticket, but because she had done it with no expectation of reward, recognition, or thanks. Just because it was the right thing to do. He slowly stepped back into the flow of the terminal, not wanting to disturb the moment. But her face stayed with him, kind, composed, unforgettable. He didn't know her name, but he made a quiet mental note of her features, her gesture, and the way she had changed the energy in the room with nothing more than empathy. She didn't know it yet, but her small act had set something in motion, something far beyond what she could have imagined from a quiet airport seat. And so she sat, unaware of the eyes that had seen her kindness, of the life she had just touched, and of the quiet ripple she had created in a world that needed more people like her. Weeks had passed since that moment at the airport, but the memory of it still lingered in his mind like a quiet echo. The man now sat behind a wide, glass-topped desk in a sleek corner office on the 39th floor of a towering corporate building. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the room in natural light, offering a sprawling view of the city skyline. The walls were lined with subtle artwork and shelves of awards, books, and personal photos, yet none of it seemed to hold his attention today. He leaned back slightly in his executive chair, the weariness from the airport long gone, replaced by the polished presence of a powerful figure, a man used to being in control, used to making decisions that influenced entire industries. The suit he wore was crisp, his hair neatly styled, and his assistant had just briefed him on a stack of business reports sitting at the edge of the desk. But instead of diving into numbers or strategy, he found himself gazing at a photo of his daughter on the desk, taken just a few days after their trip. She was smiling, holding a teddy bear she'd picked out at a gift shop they never would have reached if that woman hadn't stepped in. That simple moment of kindness had shifted everything. He had made the meeting he was rushing to, a meeting that turned into the beginning of a life-changing deal. But even more important than the business success was the renewed clarity he had found that day, the reminder that there were still people who did good for the sake of good. He turned in his chair, facing his assistant who had just returned with a folder. "Any promising candidates for the new foundation manager?" he asked, his tone thoughtful. His company had recently launched a philanthropic branch, something he had considered for years but never acted on until that airport moment. It felt like a sign that it was time to create something that honored genuine, human kindness. His assistant nodded. "Actually, yes. There's one that stood out. Not a flashy resume, but impressive community work, strong ethics, and a powerful personal statement." He took the folder and opened it slowly, eyes scanning the documents. Then he froze. A photo clipped to the corner of the resume stared back at him, her. The same woman from the airport. The stranger who had given up her seat with no idea who he was. She hadn't known he was a millionaire. She hadn't known he was the CEO of one of the largest firms in the city. She had acted purely out of compassion. For a moment, he just looked at her picture in silence. The memory came flooding back. Her gentle voice, her steady eyes, the way she said, "You need it more than I do." It all came crashing back with such clarity, it almost felt unreal. He smiled, a genuine smile, rare even for him. "Schedule an interview," he said, closing the folder with a decisive tap. "But don't tell her anything yet." He turned once more to the window, watching the city below. Fate had a strange way of bringing people back into your life, especially the ones who change it with a single, selfless choice. The morning sunlight poured into the office as he sat behind his desk, holding the folder that now carried a different weight. Her resume rested neatly inside, along with a brief but heartfelt cover letter. She had applied for the position through the company's open application portal, likely having no idea whose hands her file would eventually land in. He wondered what compelled her to apply. Was it simply another job opportunity, or had life taken a turn that brought her here, to this precise moment? He leaned back in his chair, the polished leather creaking slightly, and studied the photograph attached to her resume. It was a modest picture, not professionally done, just a simple snapshot that mirrored the same quiet confidence he remembered from the airport. She had that same gentle expression, eyes that seemed to speak before her mouth ever could. There was something authentic about her, something rare. He couldn't stop thinking about that day. She hadn't known who he was. There had been no camera, no audience, no motive. She didn't expect gratitude or recognition. She didn't know that her one act of generosity had helped him make it to the most pivotal meeting of his year, one that changed the course of both his company and his personal life. Since then, he'd started doing things differently. He had restructured his time to focus more on his daughter, made room for causes that mattered, and launched the foundation that this new position would help lead. All of it, in some way, traced back to her. He called in his assistant. "Reach out to her. Let's schedule an interview, soon." His assistant nodded. "Should I tell her you've already chosen her?" He paused. "No. Treat it like a regular interview. I want to hear her speak. I want to see who she is now, not just who I remember." Later that afternoon, the invitation email was sent. The message was professional, kind, and brief, inviting her to the company's headquarters for a formal interview the following week. She replied just an hour later, expressing her gratitude for the opportunity and confirming the time. Her words were thoughtful and warm, much like her actions that day. There was no trace of entitlement, just humility and quiet excitement. In the following days, he found himself anticipating the meeting in a way that surprised him. He reviewed the job description again and again, fine-tuned the questions they would ask. It wasn't just about filling a role anymore. It was about finding the right person to carry forward the values he now believed mattered most: empathy, integrity, humanity. As the interview day approached, he prepared the room himself. He didn't want it to feel sterile or intimidating. He made sure there were no distractions, no power play in the setting. This wasn't going to be about boardroom status or corporate speak. It would be about seeing the woman behind that selfless moment. And she, walking into the interview completely unaware, had no idea that the man who would sit across from her, in a suit instead of a coat, behind a desk instead of at an airport gate, was the same man whose journey she had unknowingly changed forever. The morning of the interview arrived with a soft overcast sky, casting a silver glow over the city. She stepped out of the elevator on the 39th floor, smoothing the front of her simple but elegant blouse. Her heart beat a little faster than usual. The building was imposing, the kind of place where high-level executives made big decisions in glass-walled rooms. She clutched her portfolio a little tighter, reminding herself that this was just another opportunity, one of many she'd applied to in the past few months. Still, something about this one felt different. She couldn't explain it, but from the moment she got the email, she sensed something waiting for her on the other side of this interview. The receptionist smiled and guided her to a waiting area. Everything around her was polished and quiet, muted tones, expensive furniture, and tall windows that overlooked the entire city. She sat, back straight, rehearsing answers in her head, steadying her breath. She didn't know who she'd be meeting, but the title in the email had mentioned a department head and director. Probably someone important. Probably someone who saw dozens of candidates a week. A few minutes passed before the assistant returned. "He'll see you now," she said with a warm smile. She rose, followed the assistant down a long hallway lined with soft lighting and framed photos of company milestones. Then the assistant gently opened a large office door and motioned her inside. She stepped in, and there he was. For a split second, her breath caught in her chest. She didn't recognize him at first, not in the sleek navy suit, not with the calm authority he now wore like a second skin. But then he stood, and his eyes met hers. It was him, the man from the airport. The father. The stranger she had given her ticket to without a second thought. He saw the realization flash across her face, the widening of her eyes, the sudden stillness in her posture. He offered a small, genuine smile and extended his hand. "Thank you for coming," he said gently. "It's very good to see you again." She blinked, still stunned. I didn't know." "I know," he said, motioning to the seat across from him. "Please, sit." She lowered herself into the chair slowly, still trying to reconcile the image of the exhausted father with this poised CEO now sitting in front of her. Her mind raced with questions, but his calm presence steadied her. "You probably never expected to see me again," he said, leaning forward slightly. "But I never forgot what you did that day. You didn't just help me catch a flight. You helped me when I was at my breaking point. You helped my daughter. And you did it with nothing to gain." She smiled softly, still processing. "I didn't know who you were. That's what made it matter even more." For the next 20 minutes, they talked, not just about the job, but about purpose, kindness, and how small actions can create lasting change. She spoke about her background, her work in the community, her desire to do something that mattered. And he listened, truly listened, already knowing he had made his decision before she even walked through the door. By the end of the conversation, he stood again, this time not as a CEO, but simply as a man offering a second chance, not just to her, but to himself, to lead differently. "I'd like to offer you the position," he said, with quiet certainty. "If you're still interested." Tears welled gently in her eyes, not from surprise, but from the overwhelming sense that everything, even the seat she once gave up, had led her exactly where she was meant to be.